Chapter 11. The Targaryen Smuggling Plan. Daenerys was gracefully led by Aegon to the center of the ballroom. The other girls drifted casually around the edges of the dance floor, chatting in twos and threes. They buzzed with gossip about Aegon, the new rising star of House Targaryen, and occasionally cast curious glances at the couple swaying slowly to the music. At the center of the floor, Aegon wrapped an arm around the girl's slender, supple waist and danced a traditional Valyrian waltz. "I knew you'd pick me." Daenerys leaned into Aegon, her body pressed closely against his. Tilting her head up, she gave him a sultry, teasing look. Aegon chuckled. "You were that confident. Aren't all men the same? See a pretty woman and want to make her theirs. And who told me to be the prettiest of all my sisters?" Her cheeks flushed slightly as she placed both hands gently on his chest, keeping him from taking further liberties. Caught off guard, Aegon let out an awkward laugh and quickly changed the subject. "Who's your father?" "I'm Lord Aenar's bastard daughter. Does that bother you?" "I won't force you." Daenerys's lips curled into a faint smile, revealing two charming dimples. Her vivid violet eyes locked with Aegon's as her slender finger lazily traced circles on his chest. Aegon was tickled by her flirtatious air and thought to himself, this girl really knows how to handle men, every gesture oozes allure. If it weren't for the blush spreading across her face, he might have assumed she was a seasoned flirt. Given how seriously Aenar took this marriage alliance, Aegon was certain she was still a maiden. After all, he was choosing the future matriarch of his house. Aenar wouldn't dare insult him with someone secondhand. If Aegon felt deceived and became resentful, it would do the Targaryens no good. Daenerys had 4 talents. Though all of them were E rank, that was still more than anyone Aegon had met. 2 were even related to breeding, definitely a girl worth marrying. "You win. I choose you. I want to be the matriarch." Daenerys pressed her chest softly against him, looking up at Aegon with longing eyes. Aegon smiled but didn't agree outright. "Let's see how you perform." He caught the hand that had been playing on his chest, stopped dancing, and led her over to the steward, Farlan, to announce his decision. Farlan nodded with a warm smile, clearly pleased. Now it was time for Aegon to choose his second wife. The first time, he'd focused on beauty and figure. This time, he decided to pay close attention to talent data. He calmly picked up a bottle of wine and made his way around the room, offering a toast to each girl. During the introductions, Aegon would casually brush against them, discreetly gathering their attribute information. Among the 12 remaining girls, the one with the most outstanding stats was a young girl named Ilya. And she was a maiden in the truest sense. Ilya hadn't even turned 10 yet. Ilya Targaryen. Attribute values still developing politics. 21. Strategy. 34. Military strategy. 15. Mental strength. 89. Vitality. 33. Talents. D rank. Green hand bloodline. Maiden. Plus 50% natural affinity. Plus 150% fertility. 10% chance to awaken as a skin changer each year. Plus 5% to awakening chance per year. D rank. Chaste. Plus 5 mental strength for remaining pure before marriage. Plus 10 mental strength for loyalty to spouse after marriage. True dragon blood. Mixed lineage. Charisma plus 0.5, fire resistance increased to 10%, mental resistance minus 15%, 5% chance to tame a dragon. Skills. Aegon smiled as he gently clinked his glass with Ilya's. Her ash-gray hair hinted that her mother likely wasn't of Valyrian descent. The green-hand bloodline talent probably came from Garth, the demigod of the Reach in Westeros. At that moment, Ilya was clutching a large horn cup in both hands, her small face half buried in it. But her wide eyes kept sneaking peeks at Aegon. Aegon stood in front of her, unmoving for quite some time. "Lord Aegon, don't you like me?" Ilya tilted her head slightly and asked softly, her voice clear and sweet. Aegon shook his head. "It's not that I don't like you, you're just too young." "I'm only a little short, not young at all." Ilya puffed out her round, full chest with feigned innocence, the ruffled fabric bouncing with the movement. The display was adorably bold. Aegon couldn't help but chuckle. He reached out and gently ruffled her hair. "You're all such little schemers. Come with me." After informing Farlan of his decision, the brief dance came to an end. Aegon was fairly satisfied with the event. Being surrounded by beautiful maidens ripe for the picking left him feeling more than a little pleased. But it was only possible to choose like this because the legitimate daughters of House Targaryen had been excluded. Otherwise, no matter how favored he was, there was no way Daenerys would have been sent to accompany him for such a selection. That evening, Aegon took a leisurely stroll around the castle with the 2 girls. They spent some time learning about each other. Daenerys's mother had been Lord Aenar's paramour. Thanks to her striking looks, Daenerys had enjoyed his favor since childhood and lived a relatively privileged life. Ilya's mother, on the other hand, had been a slave who had since passed away, and her father was Aenar's brother, a dragon tamer. After escorting the girls back to their respective quarters, Aegon was informed by the steward Farlan that Lord Aenar was waiting for him in the study to discuss the marriage. Aenar seemed especially fond of black tea. When Aegon entered the study, a steaming cup had already been poured for him. Without ceremony, he picked it up and took a long sip, letting the warmth drive out the remnants of wine from his system. Aenar looked up from the long ledger in his hands and turned to Aegon. "I'll hold the wedding once you're back from taming dragons. How does that sound?" "The sooner, the better." Aegon topped off Aenar's teacup before pouring one for himself. "How soon?" "Tomorrow," Aenar asked, surprised. "Tomorrow works." Aegon nodded seriously. "I don't know what dangers I might face while taming dragons. I want to leave behind an heir first." Aenar lowered his head slightly in thought for a moment. "Very well. If you're that eager, I'll arrange a simple ceremony for you tomorrow." "Thank you, Lord. I appreciate your efforts," Aegon replied sincerely. "Don't be so pessimistic. The dragon taming tournament isn't as terrifying as you think," Aenar said in a calming tone. "One more thing, the dragon-headed paddleboats from your guild must be fully prepared. With less than half a month before the dragon taming tournament, we need to load the family's supplies onto the ships. While the tournament draws the attention of every Dragonlord house, our family will use the distraction to quietly smuggle critical goods out of the Valyrian Peninsula." Aenar laid out the Targaryens' migration plan clearly. "We're leaving this soon. Some members of the council have already proposed a motion to impeach House Targaryen. If we delay much longer, we may not even get the chance to leave." Aenar sighed and took a slow sip of his tea. Aegon could clearly hear the weight Aenar was carrying. "I understand. All the men and ships of the dragon's treasure are at House Targaryen's command," he answered. Aenar nodded, satisfied. Early the next morning, in the marketplace of Targaryen Hill, several old women were distributing black bread to the poor. Though House Targaryen hadn't made any formal announcements, the charitable grain handouts and the circus festivities in nearby towns made it clear to the public, a celebration was underway. The main hall of the Targaryen stronghold had been meticulously decorated. Festive black and red drapes hung high above, embroidered with lifelike images of dragons soaring through clouds, lending the space an air of both opulence and grandeur. Night fell. Inside the hall, rows of neatly arranged tables and chairs were draped in fine silk and brocade. Gold and silver tableware sparkled under the candlelight, radiating the lavishness expected of a Dragonlord house. Though the guest list for Aegon's wedding wasn't large, all attendees belonged to the ruling circle of House Targaryen. Jaeman, serving as Aegon's best man, stood with him outside the hall to welcome the guests. It was during this time that Aegon met two of House Targaryen's most important vassals for the first time, House Velaryon and House Celtigar. The heads of both houses looked at Aegon with evident curiosity, though their demeanor toward their future ally was cordial enough. The wedding officially began. Aenar and Ilya's father escorted the two brides from the left side of the hall to Aegon's side. Daenerys wore a snow-white gown of lace and velvet. The dress clung tightly to her figure, accentuating her ample curves, while the large, birdcage-like hoop skirt and sweeping train swayed gently as she walked. Ilya was dressed in a luxurious pale blue gown with intricate openwork designs. The delicate silk clung to her smooth, porcelain-like skin, making her look tender and lovely. The only incongruity was her petite frame. Standing beside the tall, statuesque Daenerys, Ilya looked more like a flower girl than a bride. Aegon placed wedding rings on the fingers of both his brides. With the ceremony complete, a lively and cheerful dance was inevitable. Wearing a smile, Aegon led his two wives onto the dance floor for the first dance of their new marriage. After that, the trio moved through the hall, toasting family members from both sides. With Jaeman's introductions, Aegon became acquainted with many key figures within House Targaryen. Once he had celebrated with the guests for a time, Aegon politely excused himself. The bustling dance floor wasn't his destination tonight, it was the eagerly awaited bridal chamber. When he pushed open the door to the newly prepared bedroom, the sight before him made him stop in his tracks. Both brides had already shed their voluminous Valyrian gowns, now dressed in sheer, gauzy robes that left little to the imagination. The translucent fabric clung to their bodies like a second skin, making their glowing flesh appear to shimmer beneath. As they stepped forward to gently help him undress, Aegon managed to keep his composure. He quietly approached Ilya, gently lifted her in his arms, and placed her on a table, speaking softly, "You're not ready yet. You're still too young. Let's wait a couple of years." "Why can't I? What part of me is too young?" Ilya glared at him, puffing her cheeks in frustration. Daenerys stifled a laugh behind her hand. "Don't argue. You're not ready in any way. She slowly undid the sash of her gauzy robe. The fabric floated to the ground, boldly revealing her flawless figure. Her full chest and sculpted curves radiated a seductive allure. Tears welled up in Ilya's eyes as she looked at Aegon, her voice laced with grievance. You really don't want me? Seeing her pitiful expression, Aegon felt a surge of tenderness and gently reassured her, you're still young. There's no rush. After some coaxing, he finally settled the tearful Ilya in a side chamber. Then, Aegon returned to face Daenerys, calm and composed, and together, they began their new journey. Ding! A notification flashed through Aegon's mind, but he was far too busy charging into battle to bother with a game prompt. 3 comments 0 vote. Chapter 12. Before the storm. Early the next morning, just as the sky began to lighten, Aegon suddenly felt as though something was pressing down on his chest. It was hard to breathe, almost like being pinned by a ghost. Fighting off a heavy drowsiness, he finally opened his eyes and saw Ilya lying on top of him, staring intently. Somehow, she had managed to unlock the side room door and make her way onto the bed. She had dark circles under her eyes, her face red and puffy from crying. Her pitiful appearance tugged at the heart. Aegon had been up until the early hours, fighting for love, and exhaustion weighed heavily on him. Half asleep, he scooped Ilya off his chest and pulled her into his arms like a soft pillow, then drifted right back to sleep. Ilya didn't cry or fuss. It seemed she hadn't slept well either. Nestled in Aegon's arms, she soon fell into a deep slumber. By noon, warm sunlight filtered gently through the window, and Aegon slowly woke with bleary eyes. Daenerys, lying on her side, had her ample chest squished flat like papayas. Little Ilya rested quietly in his arms. Not wanting to disturb them, Aegon opened his game panel instead. He remembered that notifications had been going off non-stop last night. He'd muted them at some point and still didn't know what they were about. He brought up the game log. You are working hard to propagate your family. Gained 0.001 destiny points. You are working hard to propagate your family. Gained 0.001 destiny points. You are working hard. The log was packed with identical messages, thousands of them. Aegon blinked in surprise. After a moment of thought, he figured out what must have happened. Those notifications had likely appeared while he was actively charging into battle the night before. So every time earned him 0.001 destiny points. Back when he played Destined Godblood on his phone in his past life, there had never been a system like this. Who would have thought that after transmigrating into the game world, there'd be hidden perks written into the program? Destiny points used to be a scarce resource, but now he had a way to replenish them. From now on, he could count on them to support training, talent chip missions, and more. He opened his personal stats panel. The previous night's frenzy alone had earned him 3 destiny points. Clan member: Aegon. House: Targaryen. Offspring: none. Nation: Valyrian Freehold. Faction: Dragon's Treasure Guild, House Targaryen. Politics: 80. Strategy: 80. Military strategy: 80. Mental strength: 80. Vitality: 80. Talents: S rank, Alien chip, True Dragonblood, Dragonborn. Skills: Valyrian Common Tongue, Proficient. Valyrian Military Swordsmanship, Proficient. Roiner Javelin Techniques, Expert. Destiny points: 87.83. Items: none. Aegon gently pulled one of Daenerys's legs over his waist, and confirmed the result. You are working hard to propagate your family. Gained 0.001 destiny points. Just as expected, he was just about to pull out, when Daenerys took initiative herself. Aegon shot her a sideways glance and saw her lying there with her eyes closed, pretending to sleep. He couldn't help but chuckle. That talent of hers, strong desire, was something else. She really acted the part, insatiable in every sense. By afternoon, Aegon got up and summoned the maids. The servants came in one after another to clean the thoroughly wrecked bedchamber. After sharing a meal with the 2 sisters in the bridal room, Aegon stepped out into the courtyard to stretch his legs, only to be dragged off to the training grounds by Jaemin. This training session marked the first time Jaemin's sister, Daenerys, joined their team. Since the 3 of them would soon explore the dragon lairs together during the upcoming dragon taming tournament, it was necessary to build up their coordination and combat synergy. They formed a small tactical unit. Jaemin, wielding dual swords, took the lead as the primary attacker, with Aegon and Daenerys flanking him as defenders. Aegon used a sword and shield combo, while Daenerys wielded a smaller buckler paired with a slender blade no wider than 2 fingers. The training was structured as squad versus squad combat. The Targaryen warrior team faced off against the dragon taming trio, their goal to sharpen group tactics and improve coordination. During the spar, Aegon accidentally brushed against Dany's and immediately gained access to her stat profile. Dany's Targaryen. Attributes: developing politics. 81. Strategy. 84. Military strategy. 75. Mental strength. 99. Vitality. 53. Talents. C rank. Dragon Dreamer. Has a chance of experiencing prophetic dreams related to herself. Mental strength +5. D rank. Dreamwalker. Can traverse the dreams of other beings through spiritual mediums, manipulate or interfere with them using mental power. Mental strength +3. D rank. Septon of Restrain. Gains +10 mental strength when suppressing personal desires. Breaking asceticism unlocks inverse talent, Apostle of Lust. True Dragon Blood. Dragonseed. Charisma +2.5. Fire resistance increased to 80%. Mental resistance -50%. 70% chance to tame a dragon and become a dragon rider. Skills. Daenerys' stunning stats left Aegon speechless. Her mental strength was nearing the peak of human limits. That combination of 1 C rank and 2 D rank talents made her one of the most gifted individuals he had ever encountered. Aegon, don't space out, Daenerys called, noticing the way his eyes lingered on her. Got it. Aegon nodded, refocusing instantly. With a precise move, he raised his shield and cleanly deflected an incoming heavy sword strike. ... And so, Aegon settled into a daily rhythm, training in combat by day and enjoying the tender company of his wives by night. Another quiet week slipped by. Now, only 5 days remained before the dragon taming tournament. That evening, Aegon was summoned by Farlan and led to the study. Inside, Aenar was already waiting, and Jaeman and his sister Daenerys were there as well. The three of them were gathered around the desk, engaged in a lively discussion. As Aegon approached, Aenar gestured for him to come closer and pointed to a map laid out on the desk. This dragon pit map is part of a trade offer from House Aurelian, the Dragonlord family you've had grievances with. The Blackstone Tower has been sold to them. Aegon stepped forward. Aenar nodded. Negotiations concluded earlier today. House Aurelian was determined to acquire the land beneath that tower. In return, they provided this map, which marks the locations of 2 dragons, one of which is suspected to be a king-level dragon. Go ahead and choose. He stepped aside to give Aegon space and pointed toward a red dot on the map. Jaeman, eyeing the map, couldn't hide the envy in his expression. The 3 dragons our house keeps at the 14 Flames aren't of king rank. You're really lucky. Aegon gave a small smile. I traded away our foundation to get this opportunity. Then he focused intently on the map. 2 dragon pits were marked. One was grayed out, with a note explaining that the dragon there had just been born, a young dragon with gray scales. Its bloodline had only just reached the true dragon level, and its potential appeared modest. The other location was marked with a striking red dot. The accompanying text described a fully grown dragon covered in red scales, a powerful beast over 120 meters long. However, it was notoriously aggressive. So far, no one had succeeded in taming it. Aegon hesitated. They just handed over information on a king-class dragon so easily. Doesn't that seem suspicious? Aenar paused briefly, then revealed the real reason. That land of yours backs onto a dormant volcano, one that contains rare dragonglass ore. Dragonglass is essential for forging Valyrian steel. Its value easily rivals that of a king-level dragon. So that's what this is really about, Aegon thought. No matter how valuable the ore is, it's worthless if we don't survive to mine it. The Valyrian Peninsula is on the verge of collapse. Aenar nodded approvingly. Seeing that Aegon showed no hint of regret, his opinion of the young man rose even higher. If you're concerned about the dragons from House Aurelian, House Targaryen also maintains 3 adult dragons in the 14 Flames. You're welcome to choose from those instead. He unrolled another scroll beside the desk. The topography was similar to the previous map, but the dragon pit locations were different. I'll still go with the Red King Dragon, Aegon said at last. This one, Mother of Dragons, is said to love magic plants. I've been collecting some. It might help with taming. He couldn't resist the allure of a king-level dragon. Jaeman let out a sigh. He, too, deeply envied the massive crimson beast. Very well, Aenar said, rolling the scroll back up with a smile. One more thing, don't get too carried away with your honeymoon. Your combat training hasn't been looking sharp lately. You're about to enter the 14 Flames. Make sure your legs aren't too soft to stand. Aegon gave a helpless laugh but didn't reply. In truth, he was hoping to get his wife pregnant before heading into the Fire Mountains. If something were to happen to him in there, at least he'd leave behind an heir. Besides, the destiny points he earned from each passionate night were hard to pass up. Father, I'm still here, Daenerys said with a playful scowl, glancing at Aenar. Aenar laughed heartily. Once the dragon taming tournament is over, we'll be relocating to Dragonstone. That's when we'll hold your wedding with Jimin. Daenerys flushed bright red. Jimin, grinning like a fool beside her, earned a sharp kick for his trouble, then bolted from the study in a hurry. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon.com, BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 6 comments 0 vote. Chapter 13. To rebuild a home. The 14 flames lay within the Valyrian mountain ranges, not merely a set of 14 peaks, but the tallest summits among a sprawling chain of mountains. Over thousands of years of brutal internal struggle, the 14 most powerful Dragonlord families came to control these peaks. These families formed the Dragonlord Council, seizing the highest authority within the Freehold. To tighten their grip on power and monopolize the right to tame all dragons, the Dragonlord Council enacted the Dragon Code. All newly laid dragon eggs from true dragon families were transported to the base of the 14 flames, where they were housed in a labyrinth of winding canyons under centralized management. Through this system, even the true dragon families were tamed like the dragons themselves, and the Valyrian Freehold thrived under the iron rule of the Dragonlords. The territory known as Flaming Breath belonged to House Aurelian, a massive Dragonlord family with numerous branches spread throughout the region. The Red Flame Ridge of Flaming Breath was under the command of Lymond Aurelian. At that moment, Lymond was personally slaughtering cattle and sheep, which his servants then carried away to roast. His adult dragon, Valinor, preferred cooked meat. It had been fed prepared food since hatching and refused to char its meals with dragonfire, only fresh, cooked meat would do. Bruss stood respectfully beside Lymond and reported, "All ships of the Dragon's Treasure Guild have recently left port. My informants say they headed toward the continent of Essos, but in reality, they looped around and docked at Targaryen Bay." Lymond paused, then let out a chuckle. "You're not completely useless. I guess I won't have to save your mangy hide from the Targaryens after all." He stood, wiping blood from his hands onto Bruss's spotless white robes. Bruss didn't flinch at the crude treatment. Bowing low, he grinned obsequiously. "It's all thanks to you, my lord, that I'm still alive. Naturally, I'll be a loyal and useful dog." Lymond sneered at the old man with open disdain. "That rat from House Targaryen will slip away eventually. Many council members are eyeing that prize like starving wolves. Luckily, your inside work with the Dragon's Treasure Guild gave us an early hint. You deserve a reward. To serve a mighty Dragonlord like you is old Bruss's greatest honor." Bruss bowed even lower. "I'm promoting you to first-class citizen. You'll take charge of the spice trade between Red Flame Ridge and Essos. Keep your surveillance tight. I want a detailed report on the Targaryens, exact evacuation route." Lymond carved a large piece of meat from a roasting lamb and stuffed it into his mouth, grease dripping from his chin as he chewed greedily. Suddenly, roar! A deafening dragon's cry shattered the stillness, echoing through the ridge and setting off a chorus of answering roars from the surrounding mountains. The sound was immense, rattling the very bones of those who heard it. Targaryen Bay lay just beneath the main keep of the Targaryen Hills. Its sheer cliffs were riddled with caves of all sizes. In one of the more secluded spots was a hidden temporary port. Normally, this stretch of beach couldn't accommodate cargo ships. But once a month, during the great summer tides, the sea surged dramatically, submerging the reefs and shoals that typically blocked access. In that brief window, experienced captains could slip their ships into the bay and dock, if only for a short while. Now, with just one day left until the dragon taming tournament, the high tide had arrived. The makeshift harbor was crowded with ships, including over a dozen large merchant vessels belonging to Aegon's guild. Aegon stood with his wives, and Jimin with his sister, looking down from the cliffs at the bustling port below. On the beach, ragged house slaves scurried back and forth, loading crates and sacks onto ships, one after another, tirelessly. Each of those crates was packed with heavy gold and silver, thousands of years of Targaryen wealth. Even with dozens of ships, the treasure would have to be moved in multiple waves. "Aegon," Jimin spoke softly, his gaze fixed on the vast sea stretching westward. Aegon turned slightly to look at him. Jimin had one arm around his sister's waist. The sea breeze tugged at their hair, their golden and silver strands whipping through the air like fine silk ribbons. "Did you know? To the west of the summer sea lies a vast and bountiful land." Aegon followed his line of sight into the horizon. "Westeros." "That's right. So, you do know something," Jimin said with a nod. "For thousands of years, the Freehold has focused its ambitions on the eastern continent of Essos. More than 40 Dragonlord families have rampaged through that land, pillaging, conquering, draining it of every last drop of wealth. The spoils have long been divided. But today, I want you to understand, this migration isn't a desperate escape. It's the beginning of something new. These ships are our future. With them, we'll build a mighty dynasty on the continent of Westeros, House Targaryen's dynasty. Jaemin looked at Aegon, eyes burning with conviction. I'll do my part for the Targaryen dynasty, Aegon replied with a faint smile, still gazing out over the sea. He didn't meet Jaemin's eyes. Aenar truly has a remarkable vision. Not only did he foresee the looming destruction of the Valyrian Peninsula and steer clear of it, he also laid the groundwork for the rise of the house. From their past conversations, and based on what he remembered of the original story, Aegon had already pieced together House Targaryen's true ambitions. So none of this came as a surprise. The position father has prepared for you is Hand of the King, the first in our dynasty. Jaemin burst into laughter and threw an arm around Aegon's shoulder. Honestly, I'd much rather have you as my brother than hold any title my father could offer. Being your brother wouldn't be a bad deal, Aegon laughed along with him. At least I'd know I could trust you with my back. But I'm 3 years older than you. You're the one destined to lead the clan. Are you really willing to call me your big brother and play the part of the younger? We're brothers, what's the point of talking about status? Jaemin said with a hearty grin. Without hesitation, he shouted. Big brother. Aegon's smile paused for a beat as he looked at his half-brother. He was genuinely moved by Jaemin's bold sincerity. If this had been ancient China, just that one heartfelt gesture would have been enough for Aegon to give him his loyalty without question. Little brother, Aegon replied without delay. For both the man's honesty and the fact that he'd once saved his life, that word was well earned. And me. Don't forget me, call me sister. Daenerys chimed in cheerfully, bouncing as she called out to Aegon. No need for that. In a few days, I'll be calling you sister-in-law instead. Saves us the trouble of changing titles, Aegon teased with a wink. Daenerys, Aegon's wife, covered her mouth and giggled softly. Daenerys playfully shook a fist at Aegon, then glanced down at the large hand Jaemin had draped around her waist, and smacked it off with a sharp flick. Come on, we've never gone out drinking together. Tonight it's on me. Let's have ourselves a proper night, Jaemin said, pulling Aegon away from Daenerys. The two men, arms around each other's shoulders, strolled down toward the bustling market at the base of the hills. Now only the sisters remained at the cliff's edge. Daenerys, Aenar's bastard daughter, was just 1 year younger than Daenerys. By blood, they were indeed half-sisters. Your Highness, are we also leaving the Freehold? Daenerys asked. She had grown up on the Targaryen hills and had never left the Valyrian Peninsula. Now, a mix of curiosity and unease stirred within her. Just call me sister, Daenerys said warmly. Now that Aegon has chosen you as his lady, you don't need to let your birth trouble you anymore. Sister, Daenerys replied sweetly, giving a small nod. Once we finish taming the dragons, we'll all be leaving this ancestral island, Daenerys said, looking down as the ships began to drift away from the harbor. This fleet is only the first wave of cargo ships. During the 2 weeks of the dragon taming tournament, 2 more critical fleets will follow. Those will be the ones that truly matter, they'll carry craftsmen and the most valuable treasures. She gazed out at the fleet sailing into the open sea and said softly, we go west across the sea, to build a new home. The two brothers galloped down the hillside and soon arrived at the bustling market at the mountain's base. They headed straight for the largest tavern in the area, one with a bold sign that read, Peach Wine Tavern. The moment they stepped inside, the rich aroma of liquor and the clamor of voices washed over them like a tide, completely enveloping them. Finding an open spot, they sat down and ordered several rounds of a strong liquor called Dragon's Tongue. After downing a few cups, the fiery burn spread through their stomachs, and their spirits lifted. By this point, Jaemin was feeling the buzz. With a grand wave of his hand, he booked the entire tavern and instructed the staff to summon all the prostitutes to join them. Before long, a line of lavishly dressed women swayed into view. Their clothing was nearly transparent, just enough to call it clothing, and they came in every shade and shape imaginable. Jaemin picked 4 of the women to sit with him, while the rest moved to the stage at the center of the tavern. As sultry music played, they began to sway their hips and dance seductively. Aegon leaned closer to Jaemin and lowered his voice. You think there's a risk of catching something? Jaemin burst into laughter at Aegon's cautious look, then slapped him on the shoulder and shouted, Big brother, don't worry. These are premium girls, they're all thoroughly checked. Just relax and enjoy yourself. Aegon gave a wry smile and let one of the women curl up beside him, accepting their company. Still, all he allowed was a massage. Even he found it odd, how restrained he was acting. Thinking it through, maybe it was because, although he'd gone from a common man to someone with wealth and power overnight, he hadn't yet had the chance to be fully corrupted by that power. Instead, he'd married early, and the weight of family morals had already settled on his shoulders. In Aegon's previous life, family had always been a clear boundary for the common folk. A single man might indulge himself freely, but once he had a wife and home, those lines drew themselves naturally. Jaeman, on the other hand, had grown up in a slave-holding society. He'd probably seen things most wouldn't encounter until much later, if ever. As Aegon idly ran his hands over the soft curves beside him, he chatted now and then with Jaeman. Based on how Aegon had carried himself during his wedding night, Jaeman had assumed he was the indulgent type. He'd seen many Dragonlord heirs throw lavish banquets, and when the mood hit a fever pitch, it wasn't uncommon for the evening to spiral into a full-blown orgy. "If you're not planning to spend the night here, I'll take you somewhere else, somewhere you can really cut loose," Jaeman said, standing up with 2 women on his arms. Aegon nodded, brought his 2 companions along, and followed Jaeman out of the tavern. As they walked down the street, Jaeman pointed at various inns, brothels, and dye shops and shook his head. All of these, the taverns, the brothels, the workshops, they all belong to House Targaryen. But not for much longer. The deals have already been made with other guilds. As of today, the accounts are settled. Once the dragon taming tournament ends, new owners will take over. So while we can still enjoy them for free, let's make the most of it. 2 comments 0 vote. Chapter 14. Dragonborn, go seek your dragon. Aegon listened quietly as Jaeman spoke about the current situation of House Targaryen. As he listened, a sudden thought flashed through his mind. In the original story, wasn't the Targaryen dynasty not actually founded by Jaeman and his son? The realization gave him a start. He quickly waved his hand, signaling the 4 prostitutes accompanying him to leave. "Do you think there might be any problems with the ships transporting our supplies?" Aegon asked, frowning. Jaeman paused for a moment before replying slowly, "Right now, our house has 3 dragons. Each departing fleet is escorted by one of them. But if another Dragonlord family decides to make a move against us, wouldn't that force be too weak to hold them off?" Aegon asked with some concern. "That's already the strongest force our house can muster at the moment. That's why we need to bring out those 3 adult dragons from the dragon taming tournament." Jaeman glanced around cautiously. After making sure no one was nearby, he leaned in close to Aegon's ear and lowered his voice. "Once we leave the dragon taming tournament, we'll need to throw everything we have into escorting the 3rd fleet. That's the most important one. It's not just carrying gems and luxury goods, it's also transporting the Valyrian steel smiths we managed to recruit from the 14 Flames. Dragonstone has a dragonglass vein that stretches over 1,000 meters. Dragonglass is one of the key raw materials for forging Valyrian steel. That vein alone is enough to drive the entire Dragonlord Council mad. It's the true foundation for the dynasty we plan to build." Aegon was taken aback by this. He had originally thought Aenar's ambitions were limited to conquering Westeros. But judging from House Targaryen's efforts to steal core technology from the Freehold, it was clear their plans were far grander and more complex than he had imagined. "Truly far-sighted. I'm impressed," Aegon said sincerely, letting out a long breath. Jaeman clapped him on the shoulder, then raised his wine jug to his lips and took a long swig. "There's an old saying, dragons don't grow fat without wild prey, and people don't grow rich without windfalls. If we're not bold enough to take risks, how could a middling Dragonlord house like ours ever hope to rise to power? Today, I'm taking you to a place made for gambling." "A casino?" Aegon raised an eyebrow, feeling a little worried about Jaeman and Aenar. The true dragon bloodline came with a side effect, minus 50% mental endurance. Under extreme pressure or emotional stress, dragon-blooded individuals often swung from one extreme to another. He worried that Jaeman and Aenar might snap under the pressure they were facing. Aegon lost interest in the rest of the outing. He figured it was about time to head home to his wife. After playing a few hands at the casino, he had a late-night snack with Jaeman, packed up some food for his 2 wives, and then parted ways with Jaeman at the brothel. Back in the courtyard of the main castle, Daenerys was already dressed in the strange and alluring outfit Aegon had custom designed for her. In the flickering candlelight, "You are working hard to propagate your house. Gained 0.001 destiny points. You are working hard to propagate. ... 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. In the Valyrian Freehold, the once-a-decade dragon taming tournament had finally arrived. At dawn, sunlight spilled across the city of Valyria, each golden ray like the gentle caress of a god, slowly rousing the ancient and mysterious city from its slumber. In the vast, cloudless skies above, dragons soared and danced freely. They were colossal, casting massive shadows as they flew. Their membranous wings spread wide as they circled and dove through the air, stirring gusts of wind with each beat. Their piercing roars echoed like ancient cries from a forgotten age, shaking the heavens and tearing the clouds apart. At this moment, the streets of Valyria were completely deserted. The people surged like a tide, all heading in the same direction. To the north of the city, at the gateway leading to the 14 Flames, stood the Shield of Freedom. Dozens of enormous dragons sprawled atop the specially reinforced and widened city walls, lounging arrogantly on the stonework and gazing down at the tiny figures moving below. The square before the Shield of Freedom was already packed with people, shoulder to shoulder in the crowd. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze around the grounds. Countless stalls filled the perimeter, offering a wide array of dragon-related goods, exquisite dragon-shaped ornaments so finely crafted they looked ready to take flight, as well as various potions and gear. According to the merchants, these items could help dragon tamers better connect with and control their dragons. Aegon stood beneath the towering gates of the Shield of Freedom, among the ranks of House Targaryen. He slowly looked up, his gaze drawn to the dragons looming just above. The breathtaking sight left him speechless. Dozens of dragons dozed lazily atop the walls overhead, their fiery breath wafting from their nostrils in waves of scorching heat. Combined with the dragons still soaring and spiraling freely through the sky, a rough count suggested that at least 100 dragons had gathered for today's tournament. The old rumors from his previous life, that the Valyrian Freehold once held more than 1,000 dragons, didn't seem so far-fetched after all. Woo, woo, a deep, resonant horn suddenly echoed through the air. The dragons in the sky, as if summoned by the call, began circling the Shield of Freedom, then slowly descended onto the surrounding rooftops. The spectacle was nothing short of awe-inspiring. The dragon horn, a magical artifact that commands dragons. Daenerys shouted with excitement, pointing toward the city wall. Aegon turned instinctively toward where she pointed. There stood a bald giant of a man, easily over 2 meters tall, his body covered in dragon totem tattoos, exuding an imposing presence. He held a massive dragon horn in a firm grip, blowing into it with great force. From his slightly puffed-out chest, flickers of flame could be seen burning within, casting a crimson glow across his skin. As the horn's call rang out, the once boisterous crowd in the square quickly quieted. Everyone understood what the sound meant. The dragon taming tournament was about to begin. Soon after, an elderly man in a flowing golden robe stepped slowly onto the high platform atop the Shield of Freedom. His robe was grand and long, trailing along the ground. At the collar and cuffs, lines of mysterious runes were embroidered, occasionally pulsing with a faint light. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the old man's raspy yet resonant voice rang out. Once again, the time has come for the Dragon Taming Festival, held but once every 10 years. O great people of Valyria, from mere mortals who once herded flocks, you have walked the long path to this glorious moment, where you now tame mighty dragons. That journey has spanned thousands of years. Dragonborn, go forth. Go forge the sacred bond with your destiny. Go meet the dragon that is yours, and ride it through the passes of the 14 Flames. Let your triumph honor the spirits of your ancestors. May the ancestors watch over you. Aegon's eyes widened. The old man hadn't used any kind of amplifier, yet his voice reached every ear in the crowd as clear as day. It was nothing short of magical. There truly were astonishing forms of magic still preserved in the Valyrian Freehold. And thinking back to the tales of dragons being the result of blood sorcery experiments, could those stories actually be true? What other secrets did the mysterious Dragonlord Council still hold? Aegon wondered silently. If the Valyrian Peninsula weren't on the brink of destruction, he would have found a way to sneak into the Dragonlord Council and uncover its secrets for himself. As soon as the old man's speech ended, a roar of cheers erupted from the crowd. Then came a group of dancers in vibrant, dazzling costumes, flowing onto the red-carpeted platform before the Targaryens like sprites in a dream. Their garments were adorned with vivid dragon motifs. As they moved, the embroidered dragons seemed to come alive, dancing with them. The dancers twirled toward the front of the Targaryen line and slowly parted, forming a narrow path between them. Their elegant poses seemed to offer a warm and welcoming invitation. One by one, the Dragonseeds participating in the tournament stepped forward from the Targaryen ranks. They passed through the pathway formed by the dancers and headed toward the gates of the Shield of Freedom, stepping into the legendary domain of the 14 Flames. It's our turn, Aegon, Jaeman called, turning his head as he strode confidently down the path. The day before, Jaeman's mother had discovered that he and Aegon had sworn brotherhood, and both he and Daenerys had received a harsh scolding. As the matriarch of House Targaryen, the Dragonlord's wife was well aware of Aegon's true identity. It had been her doing that sent Aegon away from home at such a young age. There was no way she would allow Jaeman to acknowledge Aegon as a brother again. Under her stern command, Jaeman and Daenerys had been forced to abandon their bond of sworn kinship. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon.com, BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 6 comments 0 vote. Chapter 15. Aegon's hunting hour. Aegon replied softly. He began checking over his gear. The wrist-mounted dart launcher on his left arm, the forearm crossbow on his right. He turned to glance at the Royner longbow and iron-plated shield on his back, the blowgun hanging from his neck, the pouch of ultra-spicy pepper powder in his pocket, 14 throwing knives tucked into his belt, a quiver and javelins strapped to his waist, a spade hanging from his lower back, and several dozen steel-throwing needles fixed along his thighs. He hadn't forgotten even the smallest items, like flint. Perfect, Aegon muttered, satisfied. Jaeman looked at him, speechless, then couldn't help but comment, "You really brought every sneaky weapon there is." Daenerys walked over, reached out to lift the bag carrying Aegon's quiver and javelins, and urged, "Let's go already, stop dragging your feet." Aegon grinned, just being prepared. The 3 of them followed the other dragon tamers through the gates of the Shield of Freedom. Along the way, Aegon noticed that many Targaryen family members had formed small teams like theirs. Solo travelers were rare. Nearly everyone carried a map and occasionally paused to discuss, clearly planning the journey ahead. The dragon tamers heading toward the 14 flames weren't climbing upward, they were descending into the valley. After about half a kilometer, the group left the stone-paved Valyrian road and followed a narrow trail beside a slope, descending into a vast gorge. Aegon turned to look back at the seemingly endless line of dragon tamers. Over 200 dragonblood tamers had arrived for this tournament. As they made their way along the rugged mountain path, Aegon couldn't hold back his curiosity. How many of these dragon tamers will be eliminated during the competition for dragons? He asked Daenerys. About 9 out of 10, she replied offhandedly, eyes fixed on the uneven path. That many? Aegon's face showed his surprise. There should be plenty of dragons in the Freehold. No way only 20-something new tamers emerge every 10 years. Jaeman turned, caught Daenerys by the hand, helping her down a steep drop, and answered, "It's not that dragons are rare. The Dragon Lord Council deliberately limits the number of successful tamers. They need to keep the balance of power between themselves and the other true dragon families." "I don't really get it," Aegon said with a frown. Daenerys turned, took the pack from Aegon's hand, and he used the opportunity to jump down after them. Jaeman's expression turned serious. If the Dragon Lord Council wants full control over the Freehold, the dragons under the 14 council houses must outmatch the ones controlled by the other true dragon families. It's the only way to maintain dominance. Aegon's eyes lit up in realization. So that's the reason. But how do they control the success rate? We've entered the canyon of the 14 flames with no supplies, no servants, that's the key, Jaeman explained with a sigh. The dragon lairs are at least 10 days' journey from here. There are a few supply points along the way, but they only have enough food for a small portion of the tamers to barely get by. He paused, voice dropping slightly. If we want to reach the dragon lairs and tame one, we'll have to kill others for their supplies. That's how the Dragon Lord Council limits the number of tamers. Aegon clicked his tongue. Those 14 houses are really something else. Daenerys smiled faintly. Jaeman shook his head and pointed to the sky. See those 3 dragons flying above us? If tamers cheat or exceed the quota, they'll descend and correct the numbers. The dragons under the council's 14 houses have always outnumbered those of the other true dragon families. Even if we wanted to resist this kind of power, we couldn't. The House Aurelian, the one that killed your father, is actually just one ridge of the Firebreath Mountains, the Red Flame Ridge, a mere branch of House Aurelian. And even that branch alone controls as many dragons as our entire Targaryen line. Aegon let out a long breath. If we get the chance in the canyon, let's deal with House Aurelian. Maybe others are thinking the same. They planted a vicious dragon on the dragon pit map they traded to us, maybe hoping you'd walk straight to your death, Jaeman said. So House Aurelian's betting on me failing to tame a dragon? Aegon asked. Very likely. If that mature red dragon behaves strangely, don't push it, Jaeman warned seriously. Aegon gave a small nod. I'm not an idiot. After some brief conversation, the 3 followed the rest of the group to the bottom of the canyon. A small stream flowed through the area, and towering trees grew thick and lush. It was here that the large group of tamers began to split up, each heading into the forest. Daenerys took out their map, studied it carefully, then scanned the surroundings. After a short search, she gave the command. Let's head left. There's a banyan tree that bears a mark from our ancestors. Aegon and Jaeman followed her toward the left side of the gorge. They passed by many others, some alone, some in small groups. Most were silent, quietly pressing forward. Perhaps they, too, understood that in the coming half-month, a brutal contest would unfold between them all. They moved through the dense woods. Jimin took the lead, swinging his steel sword to cut away vines and clear the path, while Daenerys navigated with the map. The Canyon of the 14 Flames was a place of extreme diversity, humid rainforest zones like the one they were in now, scorching desert-like stretches, and barren stony plains. Different dragons made their homes in different environments, each adapted to its unique terrain. Their destination was a dragon lair maintained by House Targaryen. To reach it, they would have to cross 2 large valleys, a 7-day journey with 3 supply points along the way. But the king-class dragon Aegon intended to tame lived even farther out, nearly 10 days away. According to the map, the red dragon resided atop an active volcano, a location notoriously difficult to approach. We'll head to Rock Valley first. Once I've tamed the dragon, I'll be able to fly to the next 2 dragon pits. Jimin repeated the plan, then reminded them again, emphasizing, if we run into other dragon tamers at the supply points, don't hesitate. Food is limited, either they die, or we do. And the first 2 supply points are the most dangerous. That's where the most people die. Brother, I'm a little scared, Daenerys whispered. Though the true dragon families had been trained from childhood using slaves to gain combat experience, Daenerys had never truly faced a life or death fight before. Don't worry. With Jimin and me here, you won't get hurt, Aegon said, reassuring her. Jimin smiled at Aegon. They arrived at a spring and stopped to rest and recover their strength. After all, they had to reach the first supply point by nightfall and fight for that crucial first batch of food and supplies. Staying in peak condition was essential. After drinking some spring water, the team set out again. Along the way, Aegon didn't spot any wild game. It was likely that the Dragonlord Council had cleared the Valley of Animals ahead of time, to prevent tamers from finding extra food. They traveled through the rainforest for several more hours before being forced to stop again. The journey through the jungle was grueling, hot, humid, and swarming with insects. By now, Aegon's underclothes were soaked through with sweat, clinging uncomfortably to his skin. After a short break, they pressed on. As they pushed forward through the exhausting terrain, evening fell, meaning they were nearing the first supply point. In the depths of the dense forest, the thick, interwoven branches of banyan trees formed massive green canopies, blocking out the sunlight completely. Mist hung in the air, giving the place the feel of a secluded, otherworldly realm. The 3 of them were already on high alert, standing back to back. Jimin took the lead, wielding twin steel swords. Daenerys stayed on the right with a shield in hand. Aegon held position on the left, a blowgun between his lips, shield in his right hand, and a throwing knife gripped in his left. Shish, Aegon whispered. The group halted, lowering themselves to the ground. Jimin and Daenerys looked over at Aegon, who flashed them a peace sign, 2 targets. They understood instantly. In a setting like this, where visibility was limited, Aegon had a clear advantage thanks to the chip implanted in him. With its enhanced infrared thermal vision, no living creature could hide. Aegon pointed in the direction of the enemy tamers, then dropped flat and began crawling forward slowly. Reaching the back of a banyan tree, he extended his blowpipe around the trunk. Whoosh! Ah! Someone yelped. The tamer who had been hit swatted at the spot. Damn mosquitoes again. Whoosh! Another grunt came from a second tamer. What the hell? A steel needle. 2 heavy thuds followed as the bodies hit the ground. Aegon flashed an okay sign to the others. Jimin and Daenerys dashed over and quickly finished off the incapacitated tamers. This was a strategy they had drilled back at the Targaryen stronghold. Aegon used his superior scouting abilities to strike first with hidden weapons. If that didn't work, the rest of the team would engage head-on. The darts were coated with a potent paralytic poison, anyone hit would collapse within minutes. With that threat dealt with, they pushed on a few dozen meters until a hunter's cabin came into view. The siblings looked to Aegon again. Aegon scanned the area, slowly shook his head, then traced words in the dirt with his finger, 9 people in ambush. They retreated and hid beneath a hollow tree. Daenerys whispered her assessment, there's no cover within 20 meters of the hunter's hut. Anyone trying to get to it for food will walk right into the ambushers' range. It's nearly sundown. They're waiting for the light to fade and vision to drop, then they'll all make a move for the supplies. Jimin turned to Aegon for a decision. Aegon, should we wait until it's dark and join the chaos? Of course not. We strike first. Aegon had Jimin and Daenerys cut small holes in his clothing and stuff them with weeds, wildflowers, and leaves, crafting a natural camouflage suit. Then he dropped to the ground again, blowgun clenched between his teeth, and began crawling toward the nearest tamer like some forest creature, perfectly disguised. Tonight, we hunt properly, Aegon thought. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon.com/BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 5 comments 0 vote. Chapter 16. Encountering Peril. Aegon crawled forward slowly and cautiously through the thick underbrush. He pushed aside a small cluster of grass blocking his path, his blowgun already loaded with a steel needle coated in Lee's tears, a poison so potent it kills instantly upon contact with blood. Aware of how deadly it was, Aegon handled it with utmost care, making sure not to touch it by mistake. Using the red markers provided by the chip, he took careful aim at his target. Whoosh, the dart shot out like lightning. The lone wolf dragon tamer let out a low, painful cry. His body convulsed violently on the ground, limbs flailing, until he finally lay still. The other hidden dragon tamers seemed to sense something was wrong. They grew alert, their eyes scanning the surroundings, but for the moment, none of them knew what had happened. First blood, Aegon thought. Like a venomous snake buried deep in the grass, he silently slithered toward his next target. Jaeman and Daenerys followed several dozen meters behind, crouched low with eyes sweeping their surroundings, ready to respond in case Aegon's disguise was blown and he came under attack. They had to be ready to back him up at any moment. As the sky darkened, it only helped Aegon remain hidden. This time, his targets were a pair of dragon tamers. Aegon crept up behind them like a ghost. Whoosh, another dart struck its mark. The victim's companion watched his teammate collapse out of nowhere. Panic twisted across his face as he fumbled through his pack, desperately trying to find the antidote. Just as he was rummaging in a frenzy, another faint whistle sounded, another steel needle buried itself precisely into his thigh. Got him. Next. With infrared imaging aiding his vision, Aegon moved on, ghost-like, toward his next target. Under his eerie and elusive assault, none of the 9 ambushing dragon tamers survived. They were all wiped out. With the mission complete, Aegon and Jaeman dashed to the supply point to scavenge food. Daenerys was in charge of retrieving the steel needles Aegon had fired. He'd only brought 20 with him, and there were still 2 more battles ahead. They had to reuse every one. Inside the hunter's hut, dried meat, bread, and other travel-friendly rations were laid out on the table. The 3 of them moved quickly, packing the food into their bags. That's enough. If we carry too much, we'll slow down. It'll be even more dangerous if the other dragon tamers catch up, Jaeman urged. We just need enough to reach the next supply point. Aegon nodded. They strapped the bags tightly to themselves and were just about to leave. Ah! Daenerys' scream rang out from outside. Damn it, more dragon tamers. Jaeman reacted instantly. He grabbed his twin swords and charged out of the hut. Aegon didn't hesitate. He bolted after him, heading straight for the source of Daenerys' scream. His mind raced. There's no way dragon tamers near the hut could have avoided the chip's thermal scan. It must be the ones who were trailing behind us and finally caught up. They must have run into Daenerys while she was out retrieving the poison needles. Right then, Daenerys was being attacked by 2 dragon tamers. She was fending them off clumsily, her movements panicked and disorganized as she stumbled backward. Daenerys. Jaeman's eyes flared with fury. With a roar like a wild brown bear, he tore through the forest toward his sister. Brother. Daenerys cried, her eyes brimming with tears. There's more of them, Armin, watch out. One of the attackers shouted. Fall back. Stick to the plan. Jaeman gripped his longsword with both hands, drawing it close to his stomach. His whole body was coiled like a loaded crossbow. The instant he reached the battlefield, he lunged forward with a blindingly fast thrust. The opposing dragon tamer panicked at Jaeman's incredible speed. In a rush, he raised his shield to block the blow. Bang! The sword didn't pierce the steel shield, but the sheer impact knocked the tamer off balance. He staggered back, his feet fumbling wildly for footing. The dragon tamer next to him saw his teammate in danger and, without hesitation, swung his curved blade down at Jaeman, the strike cutting through the air with a sharp whistle. Jaeman grinned savagely. His twin sword style thrived in tight skirmishes like this. Twisting his waist sharply, he used the momentum of his turn to drive the reverse-gripped longsword in his lower left hand upward like a striking viper, colliding cleanly with the incoming blade. Clang! Sparks burst into the air as steel met steel. But Jaeman wasn't done. While clashing with the first sword, his right hand was already swinging his heavier blade in a wide arc, bringing it up over his shoulder. In the next instant, he brought it crashing down with overwhelming force, like a mountain falling, straight toward the head of the dragon tamer rushing to help his comrade. No, Armin, save me. The dragon tamer on the left cried out in terror, staring up at the cold, gleaming blade descending on him, his voice full of desperate panic. But the one called Armin didn't even look back. Without a word, he turned and bolted into the forest like a startled rabbit. Crunch! Jaeman's steel sword slammed straight into the man's skull with brutal force. Blood sprayed in all directions. None of you are walking away alive. Jaeman licked his lips, eyes flashing with a bloodthirsty gleam as he let out a cold laugh. He lunged after the fleeing Armin with long strides, once more tucking the sword close to his lower abdomen, ready to unleash the overhead strike from Valyrian military swordsmanship. Sensing danger, Armin dove into a roll and sprang back to his feet without even glancing behind him, running full tilt through the trees. Seeing this, Jimin immediately switched from a thrust to a slash. His sword flashed through the air and carved a deep gash across Armin's back. But Armin gritted his teeth and pushed through the pain, running with everything he had. Just as Jimin frowned, debating whether to keep chasing, a sudden sharp snap came from beneath his feet. Something clamped down hard on his left leg, and a jolt of searing pain shot through his ankle. Jimin's heart sank. Looking down, he saw a gleaming steel trap clamped tightly around his ankle. The jagged iron teeth had sunk deep into the flesh, and blood began to seep out in thin streams. The momentum of his charge carried him forward uncontrollably, sending him crashing to the ground. Gritting his teeth through the pain, he quickly pushed himself up with both hands, only to see Armin, who had been fleeing moments ago, charging back with a short sword in hand, aiming it straight at his eye. Armin's face twisted into a vicious mask of murderous rage. At that critical instant, thwack, a sharp, clear snap of a bowstring echoed. A feathered arrow tore past Armin's head like a meteor, piercing straight through his brain. His body froze mid-stride, then collapsed like a crumbling wall of earth, landing heavily on top of Jimin. Outside the hunter's hut, Aegon swiftly lowered his bow and ran toward him. Daenerys was already in tears as she rushed to Jimin's side. Her hands trembled as she pushed the corpse off him, crying out, "Brother!" Sweat dripped from Jimin's forehead as he fought through the pain radiating from his ankle. Aegon knelt beside him and examined the injury. The trap's iron teeth were buried deep in the flesh. The momentum from Jimin's earlier charge had torn the wound wide open, the meat around his ankle mangled badly, some parts cut so deep that bone was visible. "Don't move. I'll get the trap off." Aegon's tone was grim. He turned to Daenerys. "Get the medicine ready and start bandaging. We have to treat it quickly and move. If more dragon tamers show up at this supply point, we'll be in trouble." Daenerys nodded, cutting a strip from the edge of her clothing to make a bandage. Carefully, she applied the medicine. Jimin looked at his sister's tear-streaked, worried face and forced a small smile. "It's nothing. Just a scratch. I'm not dying today. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon.com, BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 10 comments 0 vote. Chapter 17. Aegon's Blood Orchid. Daenerys shook her head desperately. She knew her brother was only pretending to stay calm. Once Jimin's wound was tended, Aegon lifted him onto his back. Daenerys strapped on the food they had gathered, and the three of them quickly left the supply point. Night fell like a black curtain draping over the land. They stumbled upon a small cave tucked in a mountain ravine. Aegon and Daenerys used branches to cover the entrance as carefully as they could, trying to hide any trace of their presence. They lit a small fire, the faint flames flickering in the darkness. They didn't dare let the fire grow too large. Smoke would easily give away their location to other dragon tamers. As the dim light danced across the cave walls, the tension that had been strung tight as a bowstring began to loosen, if only slightly. In silence, the three of them chewed on the dried meat rations taken from the supply point. The meat was tough and dry, barely edible. The air among them was heavy, somber. Thinking back on the day, none of them had expected so many complications at the very first supply point. One mishap after another had caught them off guard. "It's my fault," Jimin muttered, face tight with guilt, brows furrowed. "I never should have let Daenerys go retrieve the steel needles. Aegon's the one with the scouting ability, it should have been him. As captain, I made a serious mistake. And now my leg. Don't talk like that, we're not out of options yet." Aegon patted his shoulder. "Let me handle the next 2 supply points. You've always been the one protecting us, charging ahead for our sake. Now it's our turn to protect you." Jimin opened his mouth, as if to reply, but the tangle of emotion stuck in his throat. In the end, he just let out a long breath. "The real problem is that your injury might affect how the dragon senses you. It'll lower your chances of bonding with one. Maybe we should hold off on taming dragons for now. Once we reach Dragonstone, we'll build a dragon pit. Maybe we can lure in some wild ones." Daenerys' eyes shimmered with tears, her voice trembling as she tried to reason with him. Jimin shook his head firmly. "We can't wait. The Targaryens need us, need dragons. I have to become a dragon tamer." Aegon threw his arm around Jimin's shoulders and gave them a strong squeeze. "I've got your back. We'll all become dragon riders. Let me lead the way from here." Jimin raised a hand and lightly patted the back of Aegon's. That night, though they had planned to take turns keeping watch, Jimin insisted on handling most of it himself. The next morning, Aegon gathered branches and vines and carefully crafted a stretcher for Jaeman. He and Daenerys lifted him together and continued onward, moving cautiously. Fortunately, they soon made it out of the Rainwood Canyon. The land ahead opened into a vast grassland. The flat terrain and wide visibility made travel far easier. In this open stretch, Jaeman could walk slowly with the help of crutches. His steps were still shaky, but the trio's pace picked up slightly. Another day passed. More dragon tamers began catching up from behind. But in the wide expanse of this valley, Aegon's archery skills could finally shine. He had trained in the Rhoynar-style throwing archery, which allowed him to fire arrows over 200 meters. Every time a dragon tamer came into range, Aegon would raise his longbow to the sky. With the chip's powerful calculations, he aligned the red dot of his scope with the estimated landing point. His shots were nearly flawless. In 2 days of travel across the grasslands, Aegon cut down over 10 dragon tamers who had been trailing them, like death itself stalking the rear. Most never even saw them coming before they fell. The second supply point sat at the convergence of 3 canyons. The dragon tamers on the other routes may have arrived ahead of them, but Aegon had cleared out all enemies on their path. The area around the hunter's hut was quiet. A bit of food remained inside. They took what they could, rested briefly, and set off once more toward the third supply point. Time slipped by quickly. 5 days passed. Jaeman's injury hadn't improved. In fact, the constant travel had caused it to worsen, becoming inflamed. The wound was swollen, pulsing with pain. Every step felt like treading on blades. Fortunately, thanks to Daenerys' dedicated care, he hadn't needed to fight and could continue forward with their support. Aegon noticed that the deeper they pushed into the heart of the 14 flames, the fewer dragon tamers they encountered. Maybe most of them were eliminated at the first 2 supply points, he guessed. On the 7th day, they finally reached the 3rd supply point. There was an abundance of leftover food in the hunter's hut. No other dragon tamers were in sight. It was clear their team had fallen well behind, no longer traveling in step with the main group. They quickly stocked up and left. The canyon they were in now matched the location marked as Rock Valley on the dragon taming map. It was also where Jaeman had pinpointed the lair of a mature dragon. Following the map, they reached the edge of a cliff. Looking up, they saw a massive cave, more than 50 meters across, carved into the cliffside halfway up. The cliff itself was hundreds of meters tall. At the base of the mountain wound a narrow staircase, its steps worn with countless human footprints, evidence that this dragon wasn't wild, but had been semi-domesticated and fed by dragonkeepers. But with the dragon taming tournament underway, the dragonkeepers had long since withdrawn. The dragonkeeper's departure meant the dragon hadn't eaten in some time, making taming it even more dangerous. Though a single meal could sustain a dragon for a month or longer, one in a half-starved state was far more volatile, like a wild beast, ready to lash out at any moment. Aegon and Daenerys supported Jaeman on either side as they climbed to the entrance of the dragon pit. The pit wasn't deep. Even standing at the cave's edge, they could clearly hear the dragon's heavy breathing echoing through the chamber, rumbling like thunder through the rock, sending chills down their spines. "You two head back down. The dragon's nest is right at the entrance. I'll call it out," Jaeman said. "Be careful," Daenerys whispered, eyes full of worry, hugging him tightly. Jaeman gently patted her back. Aegon bumped fists with him, then led Daenerys away from the entrance. But instead of taking the stairs down to the base of the cliff, Aegon began climbing the path carved by the dragonkeepers, heading for the top. Jaeman seemed to understand what he was doing and gave him a small nod. Aegon and Daenerys took cover behind a massive boulder at the summit. Aegon quietly unstrapped the longbow from his back, then drew a specially made, thick arrow from his quiver. The barbed, triangular head gleamed with a cold metallic light, promising brutal armor-piercing force. Down below, Jaeman stood at the mouth of the cave and called out in High Valyrian, "Scarrick. I come by the oath of my grandfather, Jaehaxus Targaryen. Scarrick." Roar. A dragon's bellow erupted from the cave. The sound ricocheted off the stone walls, amplifying into a deafening thunder that shook the entire valley. Aegon and Daenerys could feel the ground beneath their feet tremble. A massive dragon's head, like something forged from burnished brass, emerged from the darkness. Each of its scales shimmered with a metallic sheen. Its neck wasn't long, but thick like a pillar, muscles bulging with raw power. Its chest was wider than anything Aegon had imagined, easily twice the breadth of a typical dragon. The enormous beast crawled further into view. Even just its upper body towered over 30 meters high, rising like a mountain before Jaeman. Daenerys stared without blinking, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She clutched her sleeve, holding her breath in tense silence. Scarrick finally emerged fully from the cave, its 60-meter-long frame half-sprawled across the rocky platform. Its golden, vertical pupils stared coldly at Jimin. The dragon sniffed him slowly with its wide nostrils, as if trying to confirm his scent. Each passing second felt endless to Jimin. Then, slowly, Scarrick lowered its colossal body and turned slightly, offering its saddle back to him. It was a silent gesture of acceptance, a sign of initial approval. Daenerys's whole body seemed to loosen in that moment. Her face lit up with relief, a smile breaking through the tension. Jimin continued speaking softly in High Valyrian, calming the beast. Scarrick, I am Jaehaxus's grandson. House Targaryen is facing great trials. We need you to fly again, to protect us. I need you at my side in battle. Scarrick let out a blast of hot white air from its nostrils, which quickly dissipated into the cool air. From his vantage point, Aegon watched with quiet joy. He was truly happy for Jimin. He had done it. With Scarrick tamed, they could now ride to the next dragon pit, no longer forced to struggle through rough terrain. Under the guidance of their bonded rider, a calm dragon would even allow other dragonseeds to ride along, and the more temperamental ones could still be harnessed to carry a cage for transport. Jimin, leaning heavily on his crutch, limped toward the dragon. He reached out and laid a hand on its iron-hard scales, then gripped the rope ladder strapped across its back. Taking a deep breath, he prepared to climb. But the moment his left foot landed on the ladder, a stabbing pain surged through him. His balance gave out instantly, and he fell straight to the ground. Scarrick's massive head turned, eyes narrowing with confusion. Its golden pupils focused once again on the fallen Jimin, a cautious glint returning to its gaze. It nudged him gently with its snout, then let out a low rumble, as if urging him to try again. Sweat poured down Jimin's face. Gritting his teeth, he planted his palms on the stone and pushed himself up. Hobbling forward on one leg, he grabbed hold of the ladder again, dragging himself upward inch by inch, relying solely on his hands and right foot to climb. Aegon kept a close watch on the scene below, his heart full of worry. Dany's chest tightened once more, her palms already slick with sweat. Though Jimin gave it everything he had, his struggle didn't go unnoticed by Scarrick. The dragon seemed increasingly displeased with the tamer before it. Its volatile nature began to show. In its mind, a master should be powerful and unflawed, not a cripple, broken and limping. Without warning, Scarrick opened its massive jaws and clamped down on Jimin's injured left leg with razor-sharp teeth. With a savage jerk, it tore him off the rope ladder and flung him back to the ground. Ah! Jimin cried out in pain. Yet even as he screamed, his eyes locked onto Scarrick's, not with fear, but with burning determination. I won't give up. Aegon's frown deepened. The very outcome he and Dany's had feared was coming to pass. Jimin pushed himself upright with trembling arms, forcing his broken body to crawl forward once again, inching toward the dragon despite the agony. Scarrick was enraged. It couldn't comprehend why this weak human wouldn't back down. It had already rejected him. Why did he still insist on trying to command it? Flames began to churn deep within Scarrick's throat. Its molten breath roiled violently, building toward eruption. Then, with a deafening snarl, it opened its mouth wide, and a cascade of searing fire poured forth like a waterfall, engulfing the earth below. The ground blackened in an instant, the very air seeming to ignite. No, stop, Scarrick. Dany stood at the cliff's edge, panic tearing through her. She cried out in High Valyrian, voice cracking with desperation, pleading with the dragon to stop. Aegon reacted on instinct. The moment the fire burst forth, he was already moving, bow drawn, arrow notched. The dragon hunting arrow he had prepared earlier flew from his grip like a crimson comet streaking through the sky. Scarrick shrieked in fury. The arrow struck its left eye dead on, the wicked tip burying halfway into the socket. Blood, dark and thick, sprayed from the wound like a geyser. In a frenzy of pain, Scarrick whipped its head back and forth, trying to dislodge the arrow embedded in its skull. The dragon's massive body thrashed wildly atop the cliff, losing all sense of balance, until finally, it toppled over the edge. With a thunderous crash, Scarrick hit the bottom, kicking up a cloud of dust. Dany's, heart racing, sprinted toward Jimin. Aegon peered down and saw the dragon writhing in pain, its massive form twisting on the ground, unable to rise. With no signs of another attack coming, he turned and bolted toward the platform. When Aegon arrived, the sight that greeted him stopped him cold. Jimin's body had been scorched to the point of unrecognizability. His skin had burned away almost completely, revealing raw, glistening muscle beneath. Smoke still curled up from his flesh, and the stench of charred meat hung heavy in the air. Dany's clung to her brother's body, sobbing uncontrollably. Her whole frame trembled. Brother, how could you leave me like this? We promised we'd face everything together. How could you break your word? Her voice cracked as she cried, choked by grief. Aegon knelt beside them and checked for breath, but there was none. A crushing tide of sorrow rose within him, surging through his chest, threatening to drown him. His mind filled with memories, moments he and Jaeman had shared since first meeting. Jaeman had been his first friend in this strange, foreign world. When Aegon had been at his most helpless, facing death, it was Jaeman who had reached out and saved him. He could still picture them fighting side by side as if it were just moments ago. And now, Jaeman was gone, right before his eyes. How could he accept this? This isn't real, Daenerys whispered, her voice broken as she buried her head against her brother's chest. Daenerys, Aegon said quietly, his voice low and hoarse, I want to try. I have to try to save him. The odds were impossibly slim, but even the faintest hope was still hope. Aegon raised his hand. A vivid red orchid, glistening like fresh blood, bloomed in his palm. The blood orchid, radiant and lifelike. Hearing his words, Daenerys lifted her tear-streaked face. A flicker of hope lit her swollen eyes. Aegon gave her a small nod. He crouched down, gently pried open Jaeman's scorched, cracked lips, and carefully began squeezing the flower's precious juice into his mouth. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. Patreon.com, BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts. 8 comments 0 vote. Chapter 18. Daenerys' Dream. The plant sap, dark and thick like blood, trickled down Jaeman's throat. Aegon stared intently at the body, hoping, desperately, for even the faintest twitch, but Jaeman lay utterly still. Aegon closed his eyes and let out a deep, weary sigh. He didn't try the remaining 9 blood orchids. He had done all he could. Not even the game-like items had worked. There was nothing left to save him. Daenerys noticed Aegon had stopped his efforts. In that instant, she understood the cruel truth. It was over. She could only cradle Jaeman's body and sob quietly. Aegon couldn't bear to look at Daenerys in such grief. He turned away and walked to the edge of the platform, leaning forward to check on the dragon below. The beast was nearly 60 meters long, its massive body easily weighing dozens of tons. Having fallen from over 50 meters, it was severely wounded. Skarak's left wing drooped lifelessly, bent at an unnatural, twisted angle. The pale bones of the wing structure were exposed. Clearly, it had lost the ability to fly. For now, it posed no threat. It lay curled in the cliff's shadow, wailing in pain. Aegon suspected its internal organs had likely been torn apart in the fall. This is your punishment too. Jaeman, in the end, I've avenged you. Aegon sat down on the platform, his gaze drifting toward the desolate hills far below the cliff. For a moment, he seemed lost in thought. He had lost a close companion, someone inseparable from his side, and the loneliness was sinking in fast. Though he had 2 wives, their bonds were still shallow. They had only been married for half a month, and real affection had yet to develop between them. Aegon sat, immersed in his thoughts, until a sudden crackling sound of firewood behind him caught his attention. He turned slowly. Daenerys was carrying wood from the dragon pit and stacking it on Jaeman's body. She was preparing a cremation. Cremation was a Valyrian tradition. In the houses of true dragons, corpses were usually burned by a dragon's breath. But with no dragon available, this was the only way Daenerys could give Jaeman a proper farewell. She stood quietly in front of the pyre, arms wrapped around herself, her body trembling faintly. Seeing this, Aegon rose silently, walked slowly over, and gently embraced her. One hand rested softly on her back, trying to offer what little comfort he could. Daenerys pressed her face to Aegon's chest, her eyes fixed on the burning wood. She murmured, "My brother and I grew up together. Since childhood, father told me that one day I would become his wife. I believed him. I truly thought it was my destiny. But now." Aegon gently combed her long silver hair, his voice low and gentle. "I can't imagine the pain you're feeling. But I know Jaeman wouldn't want you to be trapped in your sorrow. He'd want you to be strong, to live on with his love in your heart, to face the future bravely, and find new joys along the way. You must stay strong. You're not alone. I'll be here with you." Daenerys remained silent for a long time. The flames slowly burned out, leaving only a mound of ashes. Then she lifted her head from Aegon's chest, a flicker of resolve in her eyes. "You're right. I have to keep going. Father is still waiting for me, and House Targaryen still needs me." Though it was still early, the two finished mourning with heavy hearts and resumed their journey. Their next destination was the Green Shadow Gorge beside Rock Valley, where a dragon pit held a dragon Daenerys hoped to tame. According to the map, the dragon's name was Dreamshade. Its body was uniquely covered in scales like glass, their hues shifting with the surrounding environment. Though far from truly invisible, it was nearly undetectable when flying through the skies. Night fell again without them realizing it. They found a recessed alcove in a cliff wall and worked together to seal it off with branches, building a simple shelter where they could rest. The climate in the Rockstone Valley was unbearably hot. In the cramped space, the only way they could lie down was to press closely against each other. By now, they were deep within the heart of the 14 Flames, where dragon riders were few and far between. Daenerys set up several trigger-based traps around them to serve as alarms through the night. Perhaps due to the emotional toll of the day, Daenerys gradually fell into a deep sleep in Aegon's warm embrace. Before Aegon himself could drift off, Daenerys began to tremble as though caught in a nightmare. Her lips quivered, whispering, "Brother, brother." Her arms moved uneasily, her pale limbs flailing and clawing at Aegon's back, keeping him from closing his eyes. Jaemon's death hit her harder than I imagined, Aegon thought, filled with pity. All he could do was hold her tighter, wrapping her in a sense of safety, and softly stroking her back again and again, trying to soothe her from the nightmare and help her rest. Time passed. Deep into the night, Aegon, half awake and half asleep, finally slipped into slumber. Although he had already fallen into a deep sleep, a crisp game notification suddenly rang in his ears. Ding! You have been pulled into the mental force of the Dreamwalker. Mental check in progress. The opponent's mental strength is higher than yours. Check failed. You are now entering the opponent's deep dream. Aegon jolted awake, only to find himself standing alone outside a small cabin in the middle of a dark forest. The sky above was a vast, starless void, pitch black and endless. Around him, the woods stretched deep and shadowy, heavy with a chilling, oppressive atmosphere. Where is this? It feels like our first supply point, Aegon thought in confusion. Suddenly, a piercing scream rang out from within the forest. He turned toward the sound and saw Daenerys under fierce assault by 2 dragon tamers. She was staggering, retreating step by step, barely holding on. She spotted Aegon and, with all her strength, cried out, "Don't save me, brother. Run, just run." Aegon sighed quietly. In that moment, he understood everything. This was a dream, a nightmare forged from Daenerys' own power. She must have blamed herself, believing that Jaemon was injured trying to save her, which led to the failure of the taming and ultimately his death. Overwhelmed by guilt, she had unconsciously created this terrifying dream. Without hesitation, Aegon drew the longsword at his waist and rushed forward, effortlessly cutting down the 2 dragon tamers. Daenerys looked at him with eyes full of despair, lips trembling as she whispered, "Brother, why did you save me? Why? I don't want to lose you." Aegon tried to speak, but his throat felt constricted, as if something was choking him. Not a single word came out. He stepped forward and reached for her hand, but she vanished like a bubble, dissolving at his fingertips. The surrounding space began to collapse, the gloomy world around him shattering like glass. Aegon thought he was waking up, returning to reality. But just then, the void rapidly reformed. Now, he found himself inside a brilliantly lit, majestic Valyrian temple. Looking down, he saw that he was dressed in an ornate robe embroidered with golden dragons. Daenerys stood beside him in a stunning gown made of goose down. The low-cut design lifted her chest perfectly, revealing fair, delicate skin. The cinched waist and birdcage-style skirt added a sense of noble purity to her appearance. That's a Valyrian forest gown, the traditional wedding attire of Valyrian brides, Aegon realized. He tried to move, but panic rose in him as he discovered he had lost all control over his body. Only his eyes could still shift slightly. With effort, he glanced around. The guests at the ceremony were featureless, moving like puppets without will or spirit. Under the command of some unknown force, Aegon placed a wedding ring on Daenerys' finger. In the sacred temple, the 2 kissed, completing the ceremony. When it was over, Daenerys took his hand with joy and led him into the bridal chamber. "Brother, I'm finally your wife. We'll be together forever," she said sweetly. Then, she gently removed her birdcage-like skirt, followed by her lace outerwear, slowly revealing her alluring figure. "Daenerys, it's me, Aegon." Aegon was frantic inside, but could only stand there like a statue. He felt everything. This deep dream was terrifyingly vivid. Though he couldn't move, his senses were heightened, almost painfully sharp. Daenerys' scent filled his nose, and her smooth skin seemed just inches away. His body, beyond his control, moved to the bed and lay down. Naked, Daenerys leaned in over him, her gaze hazy. Her soft tongue glided across every inch of his skin. "Does that feel good, brother?" she whispered, cheeks flushed. "My nanny taught me this. She said men like it." Aegon shut his eyes tightly, repeating to himself, "This is just a dream. It's not real. Even if she's moving like that, it's still not real." If he had opened the game interface at that moment, he would have seen Dany's talent entry. D rank, Septon of Restraint, +10 mental strength when suppressing one's desires. Upon breaking restraint, gains the opposite talent, Apostle of Lust. The talent Septon of Restraint faded and disappeared. In its place, a new one emerged in Dany's talent bar. In the real-world shelter, Aegon and Dany's bodies were tightly intertwined, their clothing shredded to tatters. It was as though only their most primal instincts remained, and their garments had long since been torn to ribbons. Dany's moans mingled with Aegon's heavy breathing, echoing like a symphony, rising and falling in waves. Night blanketed the cliff in silence. Only the faint glow of embers from Jimin's pyre flickered in the wind. Below, Scarrick whimpered and howled, the sounds haunting and sorrowful in the still night. The dragon's immense vitality hadn't allowed it to die immediately, instead, it was enduring even greater pain. Perhaps, with enough food, it might still recover. But with the dragon taming tournament underway, all the dragonkeepers had left. Its only hope now rested on the observers still patrolling the skies, praying they might spot this miserable creature. On the platform at the dragon pit entrance, a faint stir came from the pile of charcoal once used for the cremation. A burned and scarred claw slowly rose from the ashes. A low growl rumbled like a beast in the dark. With the growl, the embers erupted, sparks scattering wildly, forming a miniature tornado of fire. From within the chaos and flames, a figure steeped in dread slowly stood up, as if emerging from the depths of hell itself. In the shadows, the beast roared, its hunger unrestrained. Meat. I want meat. If you'd like to support my work and unlock advanced chapters, you can follow me on Patreon. Up to 20 chapters ahead for now. P. Atrian Com, BlurryDream. BlurryDream creators' thoughts.